Welcome to the Unstoppable Recording Machine Podcast, brought to you by Stam Audio. Stam Audio creates zero-compromise recording gear that is light on the wallet. Only the best components are used, and each one goes through a rigorous testing process with one thing in mind, getting the best sound possible. Go to stamaudio.com for more info. And now your hosts, Joey Sturgis, Joel Wanasek, and Eyal Levi.
Hey everyone, welcome to the Joey Sturgis Forum podcast, and today we have with us two special guests, Carson and Grant, who are production partners and co-owners of the studio Atrium Audio. How you doing, guys?
Good, how are you?
Yeah, thanks for being here.
Absolutely.
Yeah, we appreciate it.
I have a question before we go any further. Grant, have I met you before?
Sorry, who's talking again?
This is Eyal. Have we toured together? Did we tour together in 2010?
I played in a band called This or the Apocalypse. Well,
were you on the Doth Chimera tour?
Yes.
All right, well then I have met you. Cool.
Eyal is in Dath.
Yeah.
Oh, what's up, dude? Yeah, we didn't really probably communicate much on that tour, but that's cool.
No, I'm extremely antisocial anyways, so I'm positive we didn't interact.
That's cool.
Yeah, it always took me about 3 weeks before I would talk to anybody in another band.
I wouldn't want to interact with Grant either.
Why?
You know, just because he's Grant.
Just because. Fair enough. So, all right. So how did you guys meet, by the way?
Well, we met actually, I would say, in 2004-ish? 2005, yeah. Grant? Yeah. I actually recorded Grant's pop punk band, and that's how we met. And they were one of the first bands I ever recorded, actually. So, and then, yeah.
In 2004, you had a pop punk band?
It was my awful high school band.
Okay. How did that lead to working together?
Well, it's kind of interesting. I guess back in 2004, Carson had recorded some demos for August Burns Red, and those demos were made public. I think they put them up on their MySpace page, and that's back when the band was starting to gain some local popularity, and around the same time, those songs eventually ended up being the demos for their first album on Solid State, Thrill Seeker. So I heard the demos, and I was really impressed with the production value back then, and I'm
sure they sound like a fucking joke right now. You know how that goes.
I think that happens to all of us, doesn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah, we all hate everything we've ever put out.
I hate everything I've done up until yesterday, so.
I hate what I'm working on now, too. But
I hate myself and want to die, actually.
Yeah. Fuck this podcast.
Yeah, seriously.
Okay, so sorry, Grant, go on.
The long story short is that it was the best, quality we could get for recording around here, and we went to work with Carson, and Carson had another project called Century that was kind of his solo project, and when I was recording, I asked him if he ever considered making it a full-time gig or, like a touring band or anything, and at that point, it was just him, so...
So you joined Century?
Yes.
Okay, and then you guys, so since, I'm going to guess that since Grant was already recording, somehow that led to you recording with Grant.
Well, actually, I didn't start recording until 2008 or 2009. And
I'm just wondering how you ended up being the production partner.
Right. So fast forward a couple years, around 2008 or 2009, I started trying to record some demos, I'll use the word trying, on my laptop. And, I got like a Line 6 pod and like Superior Drummer, and I was trying to write music for my own band, This or the Apocalypse. And I took the demos in with Carson so that he could help me kind of do some production on them. From there, it just kind of snowballed. I mean, you just asked me if I wanted to work at your studio.
Yeah, well, Grant doesn't give himself enough credit. I mean, he's one of those dudes that's like super smart and very talented with music. He's got perfect pitch, and like, he's been playing music since he was, I don't know, in the womb, I guess. And he got very good at recording really fast once he started to get into it. And he recorded a bunch of local bands on his laptop in their practice space. And, I just always thought that his stuff was great. And, he's a great friend of mine. We've been in bands and stuff together. So when he was kind of looking for a place to work out of. I just said, come over to my place and start working. And then we just kind of developed this workflow where we do stuff together, and he typically focuses on all the vocals and I focus on all the instruments. And it just worked out like that, and then just kind of developed into this thing where now we do all of our projects together. So
let's talk about your workflow some, because that's pretty interesting. So do you guys have two different rooms, and then kind of like while you're working on the instruments, he'll be recording the vocals, or how does that work? Like, what's your workflow like, and how did it develop?
That's exactly right. Basically, we've got 2 rooms in the studio. There's a room upstairs that has a vocal ISO booth, and then there's the main control room downstairs. So what we'll do usually when we do a full project together, we'll record drums first. Then once they're done and we've got, scratch guitar tracks, reference, we can print it down. He takes that upstairs and starts working on vocals right away, and I just start tracking all the guitars and bass and everything else. And then, so we kind of do that. He does vocals and I do the rest of the instruments at the same time. We get, twice as much done. And then we typically, walk from our room to the other guy's room and check out what they're doing and give suggestions. So it's still very collaborative, but at the same time, we've got this pretty good groove down now where we know how we like to do things and just kind of stick to it.
I think that solves one of the biggest problems with recording heavy music, which is saving the vocals for the very end. Kind of, it's like the most important part of a record, but people are used to doing it at the very end and cramming it into 2 or 3 days. And
right.
The way you guys do it, I imagine, allows for plenty of time to explore ideas, let the vocalist be rested so that he can give the best possible performances and live with changes.
Yeah, exactly. That's one of the main things too, because we hate when when we're pressed for time and a vocalist might get burnt out. This way we can space it out and they can really focus on all the little details and the writing and getting it right from the start. So yeah, it definitely helps out a lot.
The other cool thing is that when Carson and I are working in 2 separate rooms, we'll often be like, hey, come check this out. And then we get a chance to hear something brand new for the first time. And, both of us have objectivity to each other's work. So often we can add new ideas that the other person might not have thought of, because once you come up with your version of what you think it is, that's usually what it ends up being.
Yeah, I think that's important for driving everything forward. Absolutely.
Isn't that kind of how you work too, Joey? You don't have like a production partner, but don't you also do the multiple rooms deal?
Yeah, I have a team, and sometimes we will utilize multiple locations too to our advantage as well. I mean, having multiple rooms is great, but even also having multiple locations is better. Now, it can become a completely different obstacle to manage all of that, and not everybody can do it properly. So we definitely went through some changes, but I found it to be better for the music in the end. I think it was better for the music in the end.
Well, you're not getting burned out.
Yeah, that's the biggest thing that happens, is that it clears your mind to think. At least for me, all the other guys, they had a lot of stuff to deal with, This guy has to deal with the guitar player, this guy has to deal with the drummer, etc. But when they put all of their time and energy to focus on those niche areas, it allows me to just think very clearly and openly about the creativity of the album and the direction and the overall perspective of this and that, and not have to worry about, do we have enough money to buy like another drum head because we broke the drum head or whatever. Like, that's someone else's problem. I don't have to think about that. If, that's really, I think, the proper way to do it, because you got to have somebody who's focusing everything on the creativity part of it.
Yeah, definitely.
I think when I started working in a team setting, like getting Matt Brown, the drum tech, involved, and John Douglas, the engineer, involved, and really started delegating, my work got instantly better, and my hatred for the studio went way down.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's amazing how good your state of mind can be when you can actually rest.
Except when people screw up what they're supposed to do and send something to you that's not right. Especially edits.
Yes. Yeah, but I mean, you work with Joe who's
He doesn't do
probably-
my editing though.
Oh, he doesn't?
Yeah, he won't
Okay.
touch it. It's a waste of his time. So he focuses on the more important tasks, and I source out to other editors. But sometimes it's hit or miss.
I mean, you guys know John Douglas. That's the only guy I'll work with. I mean, I've hired a couple other guys, but man, it's rough stuff out there with drum editors.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, John's outstanding.
Yeah. What do you guys do? Do you guys farm out your edits, or do you edit yourselves?
We've got like a flow down so familiar at this point that we kind of prefer to do all of our own editing. We've experienced other people doing edits for us in the past, and it's always kind of come back, and we've always had problems, with it. So
You have to edit the edits.
yeah, exactly. So and it's not that we think the way that we do it is better or whatever. It's just that we have a very kind of specific. We know exactly what we want, and we have a really good workflow down. We can get edits done quickly, So we typically just do it ourselves.
Do you guys have interns or anything, or is it just the two of you?
We do have usually one intern. We don't have an intern right now, but we have one starting in about a month, and they're usually doing it for school credit.
And do they just handle like the bullshit, like running and
pretty much.
cleanup and all that?
Yeah, essentially. We've had a couple interns actually that have been really good with Pro Tools, and they record themselves, and that's been definitely advantageous because we can give them more responsibilities in the middle of a session. They can track some stuff, and they can help edit if we need it, and we show them how we do stuff, and we've actually learned plenty of stuff from interns too. I like the process of seeing how other people do things, and then kind of taking that and somehow applying it to our process in our own way. So yeah, but usually it's just people taking out the trash. Yeah.
Well, that's important too.
Yeah.
Really important. So speaking of edits and doing it yourself and all that, let's talk about some drums, because you've worked with all different types of drummers and drum situations, and we've worked with some of the same people, like Matt Greiner from August Burns Red. So like I know that when you have a monster like him in, do you take a different approach than say a guy that might not be so good and hits kind of light, or do you change it up completely between when you get someone like Matt or someone from one of the rock bands you record?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, it all depends on the player, but, when we have someone like Matt in, we're not just sitting there trying to get, the right take. We have 8 great takes, and there's slight differences in each one, and sometimes we'll listen to the way he's hitting a cymbal in one take compared to the other, and, he'll play different drum fills every time. Their music is so complex, but Matt is just one of those guys that he can just free form through it, and it's, we get a lot of time to take care in making those choices with him, and he likes to sit with us while we do that.
Yeah, usually what we'll do when we track him in particular is, like Grant said, we'll get a whole bunch of takes, we'll get our keeper takes, and then we'll go through and actually listen to 8 bars or so at a time, and listen through all the playlists and choose our best, our favorite moments from each take, and just kind of do a comp of drums, and then once we have the comp done, then we'll go through and edit. Yeah, I mean, he's great. He's an example of a player that makes it incredibly easy, just because pretty much everything he plays sounds incredible, you don't really have to do much to it. And he hits really hard too, which is great. That's something that we like. So
I feel like the drummer is literally 50% of the battle when it comes to getting a badass drum tone, at least before you start doing mixing things.
Oh, for sure, yeah.
But yeah, I feel like everything else, like the microphones, preamps, room, all that's important, but it all falls by the wayside in comparison to how important the drummer is.
Oh, absolutely. Oh, yeah, we have a drum kit here that we like to use a lot. It's a custom DW. It's a really nice kit, and we use it on a ton of stuff. It's kind of our go-to. And I mean, for the last, a couple years, we've pretty much been using kind of the same set of mics. So, in a really controlled environment, you sit someone like Matt down at that kit with those mics, with whatever pre's we're using, and have him play, and then, you walk in some other guy and have him play, it'll sound totally different with all the same shit. So yeah, it's definitely, majority, I would say, of the sound comes from the playing, definitely.
All right, so then let's talk about the opposite situation. Seeing that the variable that stays the same, so I guess maybe it's not a variable, but is the setup. So say you do get somebody in there that's not so awesome. What's your approach then? So with Matt, it's more about getting a bunch of takes and putting together the best of the best. But what about when someone is not so good?
Well, I think, we try to work through it with them. If someone isn't nailing it and we can tell that it's not working, we'll just basically assess it on a case-by-case basis and then, try to correct the problems and try to work with them through, figuring out how they want to do a fill or how hard they need to hit. We'll kind of, coach someone along if they need it. Someone like Matt doesn't need it because he's just so experienced at this point and he knows what to do and he knows, how he wants his parts to sound. And with him, it's more of a creative thing, like let's write some cool parts or let's come up with a different, way of doing this particular part in this particular song. But with other people, I mean, usually we'll have to kind of, just give them pointers and we try to work like very proactively with, people who aren't really sure what they want, which I think is probably a majority of, the bands that come in. We have to kind of work through it and adapt to, someone's playing style if it's not something we're used to. And, we try to basically take what someone is doing and figure out what their vision is for it and achieve that for them rather than trying to make them, conform to our rules, basically.
I feel like a drummer like Matt is 1 out of 10. Like 1 out of 10 times you're going to get somebody like that.
Right. Yeah. Yeah, we've had the opportunity to record some really amazing drummers, and they're all kind of different in their own right, And Matt's just great. He's always been super solid.
So Atrium Audio has moved once before, right?
Yep.
Yeah.
So you guys had another location. Why did you guys move, and what's different with the newer one?
Grant?
Well, this is actually, if you count Carson's home studio, he had like a giant warehouse apartment. It was actually pretty cool. That was his first setup. We're now in our third location.
Oh, okay.
So the first setup, I guess what ended up happening was, Carson moved and no longer had that warehouse.
I got married and bought a house. And then, yeah,
Yep.
so that, it was basically my apartment, but there was this big open room attached to it. And it was a super cool room. It was all wood and drums sounded incredible in it. Obviously, this is, I guess 2004, 2005, we're talking. And I moved in 2006 and started renting this space in this warehouse downtown in Lancaster, PA, and did a lot of work to it.
How many rooms?
That was, there was a main control room, there was an ISO, and then a big main drum room, and then, like a storage room. So it wasn't huge. I'd say it was like kind of sectioned off on the second floor of this old tobacco warehouse. And I did a lot of construction work to that place to get it operational. There was this guy that I was pals with, and he had started building it out as a studio, but I guess he didn't have the funds to finish it, and he kind of just handed it off to me, and I finished it up construction-wise. Did a lot of drywall, put a floor in the drum room, and kind of made it my own. And then that's when Grant came into the picture, actually. That's the place we were at when Grant started working with me.
All right, and then I've seen the pictures of the newer place, and it looks great. It looks really, really, it's nicely decorated. There's a lot of gear. Looks like you've got a really big control room. Like, it looks like a really nice place.
Yeah, it's super nice. Thanks, man. Glad you like it.
Thank you, yeah.
So when you guys upgraded to that, what was the reason? Was it just like time, or like how did you guys go about doing that from the moment that you're like, we need to move, to the moment that you actually moved? How long did that take?
Well, okay, so the band Live, the band Live from the 90s?
Yep.
So their guitar player had built our current studio himself as just kind of a project studio. And he owned the building and built it out. It's 3 floors. And
Real quick, isn't it funny the bands from the 90s or the 80s, like the musicians and that, their idea of what like a project studio is?
Oh yeah, totally different perspective.
Yeah, it's like 3 floors and all that is his project studio.
Yeah, I mean it's not huge square footage wise. I think the photos probably make it look bigger than it actually is, but I mean it's the perfect size for what Grant and I do. We're really comfortable
It's
here.
a row home in the city, basically.
Yeah, it's like converted into a studio, but it used to be like someone's house, I think. But yeah, anyway, well, he owned this place and built it out as a studio himself. He had an SSL console in here, and like it was really nice. And then he ended up selling it, and so he put it on the market, and Grant and I saw the opportunity to, because we've always been a big fan of this facility, so we snatched it up, we bought it from him, and it just put us in a better scenario because we were renting our other space and spending more money renting that space than it takes to own this building, so...
That's actually the exact same thing that Chris Crummett said when he came on about the place that about building his own place and owning it, is that rent was just annihilating him.
Oh yeah, and you're just pissing all that money away too. So this way we're building some equity, you know.
And so did you guys do any construction on it, or was it just good to go?
It was pretty good to go. I mean, we made a few aesthetic changes, but I mean, the overall building of it was pretty much already done.
All right. How long did it take between, I guess, when you heard about it to when it actually happened?
A couple months. I'd say about 2 months to do the whole thing and, you know, do the move and move all of our gear in
Damn,
here.
that's quick. That's quick. Every studio move I've ever been involved with takes so goddamn long.
It worked out great for us because, you know, like Grant said, this place was already pretty much good to go construction-wise, so it was pretty much plug and play. We just had to move our gear in here and set up. So the thing that took the longest was just, you know, buying the building, I'd say.
All right, so since you brought up live, I want to ask you about this because I've been working with a lot of 90s bands like Candlebox and Everclear live. Like,
yeah.
How did that happen? Like, how are you guys, like, just how's that happening?
Well, I guess I'll handle this one, Grant, because I'm the one with the group. Well, when I was, I think, 13 years old and living at my, you know, mom and dad's house, the guitar player of Live, Chad Taylor, moved in next door to me, and that was in '94, I think. No, 95, I guess. Their big album, Throwing Copper, was out already, and I was actually already a fan of the band, so it was pretty cool because, like, the guitar player of one of my favorite bands was moving in next door. It's like some bad sitcom or something. But yeah, and then he, you know, he ended up just being very, you know, influential on me getting into music, and he, you know, has been a great friend of mine since I was a little kid, and he's actually pretty much the dude that got me into recording too. He produced my old band that I was doing when I was in college, and I really enjoyed that process, and that's kind of how I, you know, got the itch to be in a studio for the rest of my life, I guess. And you know, he taught me a lot of things early on about Pro Tools and just kind of, you know, all the basic, you know, techniques of recording, and that's kind of how I got into it to begin with. And so he's just been a great friend and you know, a great source of inspiration and information over the years. And
I feel like when people talk about the luck factor in gaining any success in music, I feel like that's the perfect example of the luck factor, because obviously you still had to work your ass off to get to where you are. You've gone through multiple changes in the studio, upgrades. You're always working. I mean, but the luck factor is that the guy happened to move in next door to you.
Exactly.
I mean, what if he had never moved in? Your life might be completely different.
Yeah, I might have not been interested in being in a band or learning about engineering and production to begin with if he hadn't moved in. So I definitely think that has pretty much everything to do with, you know, why I'm interested in what I'm interested in. And eventually, you're right, though. I mean, I did have to obviously put in the years and get, you know, somewhat decent at recording until he, you know, asked us to engineer their latest record. So, you know, we definitely had to earn that, and it went well. But, you know, we recorded their newest album up at their studio in York, PA. They built this ridiculous, like, multi-million-dollar studio up there. Like, they've got an SSL duality in there, and
yeah, I think if people listening to this are a little younger and don't know who Live is, Live was huge in the 90s.
yeah, big band from the 90s.
Yeah, had some massive hits.
They sold, I think, 24 million records.
God.
Yeah, worldwide.
Holy cow.
Yeah, yeah, it's insanity how big they were. Like, I remember that first song was on the radio for like 6 months straight.
Yeah.
And like 5 times a day or more. So, all right, so you went up to record at their spaceship studio.
Yeah.
Cool.
So they asked us to engineer that, and turned out really good. And then from there, I believe Live did a tour with Everclear a couple summers ago. It was Everclear does a tour over the summer every year with a bunch of, like nostalgia 90s bands called the Summerland Tour. So Live was on that one year, and Chad recommended that Everclear have us produce their newest record. So the dude flew out, and we did a demo at our place, and it turned out good, and we ended up getting the gig. And so that's where we got that. So as far as the Candlebox project goes, again, I met the singer of that band, Kevin Martin, through Chad, because when Live was on hiatus for a couple years, the three, I guess they kicked their singer out, and the three remaining members of Live did this band called The Gracious Few, which was comprised of those 3 guys and 2 members of Candlebox. And Kevin, the singer, was the singer of that band too.
So is it different working with veterans like that than it is with newer bands?
It depends. There's definitely times where, we don't really need to walk them through anything. We don't need to hold their hand through the process. They already get it. They've done it a lot. So, in that sense, it feels very smooth and very simple. But, with each project, there's always going to be little different hurdles to navigate and, those kinds of things. But I don't know. What do you think? What do you think about that, Carson?
It's interesting because having had the opportunity to work with some, older, much more experienced veteran bands like that have worked with, obviously some of the top, guys in the past
ever.
Yeah, they've all, between those 3 bands, Live, Everclear, and Candlebox, they've worked with, pretty much any like big dog name that you can throw out. They've somehow worked with them sometime over the last 20 years. So, it's a little intimidating, I'd say at first, but it's just a matter of again navigating personalities, and it's an interesting thing because typically, when we work with a smaller, more unknown band, we are the ones that have to give the direction and have to tell them how to do stuff and, suggest different ways. And we still do that with the big bands, but there's kind of more of a mutual understanding there. So there's a bit more of a shorthand in our communication, which makes everything a lot easier because they already get it,
Do you think it's also because they're set in their ways, too?
No, not necessarily. And interestingly enough, those 3 bands in particular were very receptive of, doing things differently than what they're used to. It's kind of a hybrid. I think for all 3 bands, we did all the basic tracking with all them standing in a room together playing live, which is kind of the traditional way of recording, And Grant and I, we've recorded a lot of more, modern heavy bands, so obviously we're coming from a place where
that never happens.
Yeah, exactly. Very, very rarely does a modern, metalcore band or something stand in a room together and do one take. So, it's great though because it puts us in a scenario where we have to, figure out new creative ways of navigating the session. I love not being in my comfort zone because that's the way I learn. So, but it was cool. All those bands, luckily they're all cool and, we're very receptive of our ideas and how we wanted to do some things. And we kind of met them halfway on how they, wanted to do some things. And, I think all 3 records turned out really great.
So I think that's pretty interesting, though, that they all wanted to play at the same time. I think that's one of the biggest differences between modern bands and older bands is that modern bands some of them never play together except for when they're on stage.
Right.
Like, ever.
Yeah.
Power tab, everything. Or sorry, Guitar Pro. That's the modern equivalent.
Yeah. And, in my opinion, there's something to be said. I'm 33 years old, and so my shit that I listen to is like 90s music, basically. I still listen to all the stuff that I listened to when I was a teenager. And, so like all the 90s rock bands like Rage Against the Machine and like, Live and Candlebox and all those bands I grew up with. And that's there's definitely is something to be said about, capturing an idea with a group in a room. And like you said, I mean, that doesn't really happen that often, at least, in the, heavy music genre in particular, and even the rock genre, I think at this point, a lot of that stuff is modern rock music has a lot of the same production techniques that, modern heavy music does now too. But there definitely is something very interesting and kind of indescribable about a band standing in a room and just figuring out a song together that, makes it sound a certain way. And I'm a big fan of that too. I think it depends on the band though and what their vibe is.
I wonder though if in metal it's just a bad idea too because of the way that music sounds like when it is played live. Like a metal record and a metal band sound completely different, whereas a rock band and a rock record actually sound more like each other. And there's a lot more space in rock music, so you don't have a lot of the super annoying things like the room going insane when the tempos are like 230 BPM and there's blast beats everywhere and like you can't understand what's going on.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, you don't have those issues with a rock band.
I mean, when we would be recording, like Candlebox, for example, Kevin, their vocalist, would often be shouting out, when to hit the bridge and like, oh, stay on the B chord here. Like, when you're playing music that is based kind of more on a chordal structure like that and not as much on lead guitar riffs, they're kind of feeling the song out in a totally different way.
Joey, have you ever recorded a band all at the same time?
Back in the early days, I did get a couple of opportunities to do that with some local bands from my hometown. And, those bands would focus all of their energy and time around being able to play and write in that way. And, I had the opportunity as well to hang out with them a lot more beyond just recording. And so some of the conversations that they would have would be, they'd talk about a bass line and they'd be like, well, I just don't think I don't think it works with what you're doing with your kick drum. So next time we all get together in a room and play, let's experiment with some different versions. And so it really was a process of refinement over, as a group. And then they wouldn't record the song at all until they felt like they had something that they could, sit down and actually play. And they would test tempos as a group as well. So it's definitely a different way of working.
Yeah.
I had a producer named Pete Thornton come to my place once. He's done some platinum stuff as well, and he brought this rock band with him that were like 16 years old and made them play live. And man, it was awesome. But the thing is, there's, like I said before, there's so much space in that kind of music that it lends itself to sounding good when it's played all together.
Definitely.
And the band was tight as hell. So that, if the band's not tight, you may as well not record like that. But I can't imagine doing that on a really fast record or something, or a super heavy record. I feel like all you would do is introduce a bunch of noise into the room that you then are going to be stuck with.
Exactly. Yeah. Yeah. We feel the same way. I mean, Grant and I kind of, for us, the process of, the whole recording process and how we do it, I think is largely dependent on what style of band it is. We've got to record some rock bands and we've got, to record some faster, death metal bands and stuff. And so the two processes obviously are just totally a different approach. So, but I mean, it's whatever complements the style of music. Like you said, there's more space in rock music, so you can get away with more of a live, type of feel. If that's what makes them comfortable and that's what, is going to, produce the best performance, then that's, pretty much what we do.
So I wanted to take a second and congratulate you guys on the Grammy nomination for August Burns Red.
Thanks, man.
Thanks.
Appreciate it.
Joey, do you know anything about that?
I'm not sure what I'm allowed to say, but I'll just say I was a part of that.
That's awesome.
Seriously, that's a huge honor, that we would even be, a part of something like this, and we're definitely very excited about it. So whatever involvement you had in that, that definitely appreciate that.
Yeah, thanks.
I'll just say, the Academy is very interested in sort of, representing music at large. There's a lot of different problems in the Academy, and there's a lot of different steps, and it's very political, and there's all these rules and everything, and it takes a while to really make things happen in a proper way, but for a good reason. They really want to protect the integrity of the past as well as embrace the future, and that's very hard to do. But they're very interested in moving forward and trying to improve everything because, last year, for example, Jack Black got the metal Grammy, and the metal community only has their one little tiny category, and it's not even, I don't think it's even televised. So for them, they look at this as like, we need to fix this. The community is obviously not happy with what's happening, and this is a problem, and we're going to fix it. So I think we're taking a step in the right direction, and I'm very pleased with the nominations this year.
Yeah, man. Yeah. I think it's great. It's a really good mix, and they're all actual, metal bands, so.
So I didn't realize that Jack Black won in the non-televised metal segment.
Yeah.
How does that work?
No idea.
It's complicated.
I thought that he won like rock. I didn't realize he won the non-televised, like specifically metal segment.
Yeah, best metal performance.
Oh my God.
And the reason why, honestly, I think is because of the Dio thing. It was the song that won was a Dio tribute song. And I mean, I'll say, I think they covered it pretty awesomely. I'm a fan of Jack Black, but do I think that it's the best metal performance? Not really. However, I don't want to discredit everything that Dio has done and all those guys, and let's take a moment to respect all of that. But I think it would have just the wrong place, wrong time, really.
Yeah, I figured that with someone like Dio, you would give him more of a posthumous Lifetime Achievement Award or something.
Right.
Not a cover.
Yeah, that was the biggest. Yeah. The biggest thing was it wasn't even an original song.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Which and a lot of people don't understand all the categories too. The category of best metal performance really is focused on the performance. It's about the vocal delivery and the band's just really ripping. Like, you can tell that it wasn't phoned in. You can tell that they're really playing passionately. That's what that category is about. And I think, you could, in a certain way, you could look at the Jack Black song and you could say, yeah, that is a good performance and they did it. But I mean, obviously the community didn't agree, and that's how the Academy, they try to be very neutral, and they try to look at it that way and say, well, it makes sense to us, but maybe we don't know what's best for this category. So let's get some people in here and figure it out.
That's a positive thing, because I think award shows in general have lost a lot of credibility in the past maybe 10 years.
Definitely.
So
it's a struggle.
It's good to right the ship.
They spend a lot of money on trying to educate people and trying to, they fly out to shows and talk to bands and say, hey, do you understand how the Grammys work? And almost no one does. And they all think it's about, how many records did you sell? How many video views do you have? And it actually has nothing to do with any of that. So, yeah, I don't know. It could go on and on about the Grammys, but, congratulations on your nomination.
Thank you. Yeah. Thank you very much.
We're
stoked for the band, and I think they deserve it.
Yeah, they're really, really good.
It's been a long time coming. I think this is a good representation of what they bring, what that portion of the community brings to the table. And, I just love it that I'm sure that there's, the average committee member age is 50 years old. So I'm sure they're going and typing this into YouTube and seeing that music video with the sharks and everything, and being like, what the? I think it's a good thing.
But that's a good point right there. You don't need 50-year-olds deciding what the best metal performance is.
I think it's a good thing. I think that it's eye-opening to see that you can take that type of music and put it in a bunch of different perspectives, like they've done, like August Burns Red has done, and a lot of the other nominations, and it can all live in the same universe. I say universe, though. It's a very big landscape or environment, but it's nice to see it all make sense, to the music community at large. And they might not understand it yet, but it's coming.
Good.
Definitely.
Well, I'm glad to hear that that's moving forward. Carson, I've got a question for you. Back to just talking about studio life and stuff. How long was it before you were making a full-time living at this?
I think that I only started doing this full-time, I believe, 2011 or 2012. Does that sound right, Grant?
11 was when we moved into the building here.
Yeah, but I was still spending like half of my time at the film company, right? Or when did I quit Aurora?
It was around that time.
Yeah, it was around that time. I would say I worked at a film production company in Lancaster, PA for, I think, about 8 years. And I did design work, some web development. And that was my full-time job, and recording was kind of the thing that I did in the evenings. And, just to supplement my income, and because I enjoyed it and I was, really into it. I don't think I quit my other job until about 2011 or 2012, and then I've just been doing this since then. So
that's pretty awesome, though. So, but you've been able to make a living doing creative things then for a while.
Yeah, very lucky to be able to have done that. I mean, I personally can't, I would hate myself if I wasn't doing something that I really enjoyed doing. So. That's just not the kind of person I am. I can't do something if I'm not totally 100% into it. I'd say give it everything you got, or don't do it at all, kind of thing.
So, did you plan on getting to the point where you were doing it full time, or did it just kind of evolve that way?
It just evolved that way. I mean, I've always been very pragmatic. I've always loved recording, but I'm based in reality, I'm not. I didn't expect just drop everything and just start recording until I had the work volume there that could justify it. So we were definitely careful, about the choices we've made, but the whole thing definitely grew very organically since Grant and I started working together. We just kind of got in this flow where we were getting bigger and better projects and more full-length albums and less local bands doing demos, and it just kind of grew, and we raised our rates a little bit here and there, and then eventually we were making enough and recording enough that we could both just do this full-time, which is we're super lucky to be able to do that. Yeah.
If I can jump in, I mean, it was kind of the exact same thing for me, because I was kind of touring part-time and recording part-time, and this whole thing kind of developed, and as time grew and we kind of refined our skills and improved, and the quality of the bands improved, we started getting busier, and it got to a point where I realized that this was going to be a much better choice for me overall. So I stopped touring and just came home to record full time, and I kind of wanted to have somewhat of a regular life anyway, so it just sort of worked out that way. But but all those things kind of lined up around the same time, and I think around within that same year, Carson and I both just ended up moving to recording full time.
Timing is everything. Do you guys have any advice for any up and comers that want to do this full time? I feel like even 2016 versus 2011, it's a totally different landscape than it was back then.
Yeah.
If you were trying to make a living now at it, to go from being amateur to pro, what would you do, or what would you say to someone who's dead set on that?
Well, definitely one of the biggest things I can say is make a lot of mistakes and then learn from them. That's huge. I feel like we've grown from, learning in that way. I'll pass it on to you. You can do the next one.
Well, I mean, I just think it's a matter of being so into this that you don't let yourself settle for, okay, I'm good at this now, and and I can't get any better, so here I am. You know what I mean? Like, I am constantly learning new things, constantly getting better and improving on, things that we've done before. And I think just having that attitude is probably, key for anyone at any level, especially if you're an amateur and you're trying to do it full time. I think it's a matter of just, never settling for whatever whatever you can do at any given moment. If you can always learn and always keep improving and getting better at what you do, then that's the most important thing that you should focus on. For a beginner, I think it's imperative to just do it as much as humanly possible, And that's the same with any skill, I think. If you're really into it and you really want to learn and get better at it, you just have to do it continuously, every fucking day, and until you improve. That's how you improve. When I started recording bands in my apartment, I did it for free, for a long time. And then I started charging $10 an hour or something like that. And, and it's just that if you can start from a place where your priority is not how much you're making, but how frequently you are practicing your, the skill set that you want to learn, then that's, you'll grow from there. I think if you're too focused on how much you're making early on, you're going to get discouraged, and it's not conducive to moving forward in a productive way. So, just do it as much as you can. Do it for free. Record friends' bands for free. Record your own shit if you don't have anyone that wants to work with you, and use the tools that you have at your disposal. Joey, I think you're very familiar with that process too, because I know that, when you started recording, you were kind of known for getting a big sound out of limited tools, right?
Yeah, and it was about sacrifice in the beginning, but I while I sacrificed a lot, at the same time, it wasn't, I didn't have. I didn't have a house to worry about. I really didn't even have an apartment to worry about. I just slept on the couch, and I think that was the sacrifice. But at the time, it didn't really seem like a big sacrifice. It just kind of seemed like this is what I wanted to be doing. I just wanted to hang out with dudes and record songs and just have fun. But I like what you said about standards. And I'll elaborate. I think you got to keep your standards high. You got to keep progressing. You got to keep looking at that next step, that next level, but enjoy the journey at the same time. Don't, like we said at the beginning of the show, I'm sure we all hate our work, but that's the endless pursuit of the artist, right? It hates every painting.
Great art is never finished. Yeah. Yeah,
exactly. And as far as motivation goes, I think there's kind of two avenues to motivation if you're having trouble with it. And I think you should be afraid of having a mundane job, something that's boring. That should motivate you to get good at this and to keep progressing. And also competition. I think competition is huge now. There's a very saturated market in terms of audio production, and you should be looking to your left and to your right and going, well, one of us is going to go forward, so it might as well be me. And I think those are two good ways to motivate yourself if you're struggling with that, and just keep your standards high and realize that somebody is going to be willing to sacrifice more than you. So who's going to win, I guess. It's not always a competition, obviously, but it's a good way to think of it.
Yeah, I mean, there's a healthy competitive attitude that you can have that, like you said, it'll motivate you to, keep improving. So I definitely agree with that.
So we've got some questions from our listeners for you guys.
Hold on. I have the question of all questions.
All right.
I need to know what's up with Galactic Empire.
All right. I'll take this one.
Go for it.
So about 2 years ago, I made a drum playthrough video that I put on YouTube of myself playing drums along to the London Symphony Orchestra playing the Imperial March. And, it was a fun video, and, it sat online for a while. And
the Imperial March is from Star Wars, in case anyone's wondering.
Oh, yeah, that's a good thing to add there.
John Williams' Star Wars score.
So, I kind of always had in the back of my mind, at some point it would be kind of fun to, add some guitar and bass and maybe kind of do an arrangement. But there have been so many covers, and, I've seen so many people do Star Wars metal, and I was like, you know what, if I want to do this, I want to do it like no one's ever done it before. And so in May of this past year, anytime we've been in between sessions, I'd been kind of working on this thing, but I ended up finding myself with 11 songs. I brought Carson in around, like, I don't know, after I had recorded guitars for fun for the first song, I realized that it could be a really cool project. So, you know, we worked together and created this entire full-length record that covers all 6 movies of the original saga, you know, before The Force Awakens kind of came into the picture. And then, you know, Carson and I were sort of talking, and we're like, you know, it'd be kind of fun to do a music video. And then we're like, well, maybe it'd be fun to do a music video if we were in full Star Wars costume. And the whole idea just kept snowballing. And, you know, I honestly don't even know, like, how we got from point A to point B. It's just kind of crazy because, you know, we went and actually we worked with Aurora Films, which is the company.
Yeah, that's the company I worked for like 8 years. So
we shot the music video with them, and, you know, they're a local company, but they have some incredibly talented people there. And so anyway, you know, we ended up with this ridiculous music video, and we put it online. And within I guess I should say we put it online the day The Force Awakens came out.
Oh.
And Carson and I are, like, standing in line to see the movie, and we're just watching it climb. Like, we're refreshing our phones. It's like, oh, it got another 5,000 plays. And we keep hitting refresh, and we're just, like, extremely excited. And we go see the movie, we turn our phones off, and then we, like, get out of the movie, and you know, by the end of that evening, it already had 1 million views, and within a week, it climbed up to over 7 million views combined on Facebook and YouTube. So it's just like, it just blew up out of nowhere. And it's hilarious because it was kind of just a total joke idea, you know, and I never really, you know, had huge plans for it. I mean, I would definitely say I would hope that it would do something like this, but I never imagined that we'd get the kind of reception that we got.
That's so awesome.
It was very cool.
I love it.
Well, it's really well done. I get it. Like, I know about most of those covers you see out there are really bad quality. Like, bad playing, wrong notes, like, not interesting, dumb videos. And so you guys kind of conquered all those different elements. I get why it blew up, and also the timing was perfect.
Yeah, the timing was key, obviously, and we that's like the one part of it that we kind of planned out. And but yeah, I mean, thank you. I'm glad that you like it, and I'm glad that it definitely, you know, I think it stands out from the other covers that I've heard so far. But when we were recording the album, and we still are actually working on recording, there's like, at any given time, there's like 40 fucking guitar tracks happening. So it's taking forever to, like, track the real guitars that are in tune and tight. We have scratch guitars right now as placeholders on a lot of the songs, but the way that we did it, the way that we approached it, was to make essentially everything in the song exactly the parts from the orchestra. And, you know, timing and all the little nuances, all the little, you know, arpeggios, because John Williams, and we kind of picked apart the original London Symphony Orchestra recordings and just kind of went bar by bar. And Grant would sit here and kind of pick out notes, be like, okay, there's that note in this octave, and then, you know, the horns over here are doing these notes, and then the strings over here are doing that. And we'd, like, kind of really detailed, you know, listening, and we'd have to, like, pick out all the different parts that were happening in all the different sections of the orchestra, and then somehow translate that to represent those notes on guitar. So there's, like, a ton of guitar tracks, and a lot of it is single note stuff, and a lot of different, like, simultaneous octaves happening. But when you pick apart John Williams' music, I think this probably applies to any of his music because he's got such a distinct style of writing. It's so fucking bizarre. Like, the way that he writes music is so weird. Like, key changes every, like, couple bars, you know, weird shit that doesn't make any sense or isn't in any kind of scale, you know.
I love it.
Like, it's great though, and, like, you know, major seconds and stuff, and, like, there's, like, all kinds of crazy musical shit happening that's so outside of the box.
But it's still so catchy and just earworm.
Exactly. And when it comes all together, it works so well, and that's why those pieces are so iconic. So the one thing that we wanted to stick to when doing it, when recording the album, was make it exactly the piece that John Williams made. You know, we're not really taking any creative liberty except for the drum parts, because as far as the bass and guitars go, they're just playing the exact same thing that all the different sections of the orchestra are playing.
See, that's the thing. That's, to me, the key differentiator between your guys' version and the other stuff I've heard. And I guess just the covers in general. When I hear people doing classical pieces on guitar or covers of other bands, it bothers me so much when they get wrong notes. It's like, how do you do that?
Yeah.
Like, do you not hear that it's the wrong note? I guess not. But yeah, with an orchestral piece like this, you have to look at the score. There's just no way that you're going to successfully interpret every single thing that's happening without looking at the score.
And those pieces are so dense too. Like, there's so much happening, all at once. So it was a challenge and took a long time, but we're thankfully kind of nearing the end of the recording process on that record. We're like fighting for downtime now because for some reason, the beginning of this year, we're super busy and we're trying to like find downtime to finish it because we want to put it out, in the next couple months, the full album. But it's, there's so much yet to do on it, and hopefully we're nearing the finish line on that.
Yeah, capitalize on the momentum.
Yeah, exactly.
And we're shooting another music video next week, so that's going to eat up our time as well.
Yeah, I'm curious to see what that looks like. So let's do some questions from the audience, because we're starting to get there on time. So your subscriber, Joey Lifting, was asking, he says, I'd like to know how there's so much punch on the snare of the latest ABR without having massive amounts of high end.
Well, I think that a large part of it was getting a good snare sound to begin with. We spent a lot of time trying out a couple different snares in the room until we found one that worked really well. Did we end up using the Greiner-Kilmer, Grant?
I think we used the Greiner-Kilmer, yeah.
Matt Greiner, actually, their drummer, actually co-owns a company that makes snares, and I think they're starting to make full drum sets now, called Greiner-Kilmer. And I think we tried out like 5 or 6 different snares, like really nice snares, and the one that he brought in that he and his partner actually made by hand sounded the best and just had a great crack. I think a lot of the sound of that comes from the actual snare sound in the room. We blended in a sample with it, as you pretty much kind of have to do to be, competitive in heavy music production nowadays and not make something sound, less powerful compared to something that does have a sample. So, but, the real kit sounded great to begin with. We made it punch a little bit more by mixing in a sample. And I'm trying to think of what else I can say about that.
I think that's a pretty good answer, is get it right from the source. I mean, I guess maybe if I had to guess what he would technically want to know is I'm wondering if he meant punch or if he meant crack, because he said high end. So I'll just ask you, do you have any ways that you would raise the crack of a snare without raising a bunch of high end? Yeah,
actually, we've been doing this a lot lately, too, is I don't know if you've ever, actually, I think the forum that we're on, that production forum, Eyal, I learned this from there a while ago, but the phase trick, where you duplicate a snare track, throw one track out of phase, but then put a transient designer on it and raise the attack just slightly, so the only thing that pokes out is the initial transient attack.
That's interesting.
Yeah, it's a really cool technique that we actually just kind of recently started using a lot, and it's great because then you print that to a track and then there's your attack right there, and you can EQ it and you can raise it up in the mix and blend it in with the actual snare track. Another thing we've been doing a lot is using the Fab Filter multi-band compressor, and we'll set that so probably from like 7K and up will be attenuated like 10 dB, but then and then it has really fast like attack and release, so whenever a transient hits, it'll let it kind of through. So it's kind of like a gate for the high end, and that works really well. And then you put a gate after that, and it's pretty much sounds like a sample, very focused and isolated. So that's a good part of it, I would think. And then just, we do some stuff on our drum bus with saturation and very gentle parallel compression. And, I personally just kind of, I like to hear a good snap in the snare. I like to hear, good power down in like the 200 range also. So, we boosted some key frequencies and then did the multi-band thing, did the transient thing, and blended in a sample. I think the combination of all that stuff together is probably what makes the snare sound the way it does on that recording.
Yeah, you got to have a lot of people, I think, will look at like, EQ is like a static, like a mask. So if you increase the high end of the EQ on the snare, you're just increasing the high end of the entire sound. Whereas doing like that phase reverse thing, you're increasing you're kind of doubling up the high end for a brief second. Or like a shorter burst of EQ. So I think not a lot of people are thinking about moving EQ, and that is part of how you get some of those tricky drum sounds is having little bass boosts or treble boosts that come in and out or move in a certain way, like in an envelope way.
Definitely.
Very cool.
All right, here's another one. Austin Schaefer is asking, can you go into some detail about the Last 10 Seconds of Life album? How did you get those guitar and drum tones?
Well, the guitar in particular, I will say, is purely a product of my friend Wyatt, who's the guitar player of that band. We've recorded, I think, everything they've ever put out, maybe except their very first demo. And every time they come down here to record with us, he's got I think it's the Mike Mushok PRS signature baritone. So that's the guitar he always uses. And I believe did we use the Ubershaw on the last record, or do we use like a 5150? Do you remember?
I thought it was a 5150.
But yeah, the guitar sound was, Wyatt basically sat here and just said to me, so here's how I want my guitar to sound this time. I want you to make it sound like the most bassy, fucking retarded thing you've ever heard. And I want people to listen to it and be like, that guy's a dick. That was his creative direction to me. So I was like, okay, I think I can probably dial that in. And so that was it. That was his thing. He was like, okay, I want people to think I'm a dick when they hear my guitar sound. So we just, fucked around with mic placement. I think it was 5150 block letter with a tube screamer through a Mesa 4x12. And I think I used a combination of a 57 and a KM184 through Vintech pre's.
I think when we came up with our original tone, Wyatt was like, okay, cool. Can you add more low end to that?
Yeah, and it was already like stupid low end.
So we added more, and it was like shaking the entire room, with low end, and the sub was just like clearly overpowering the entire mix. And he'd say, yeah, pretty good, maybe a little more low end.
So here's I'm wondering, when you have someone who's asking for something like that, like too much low end on the guitars, like something that could potentially destroy a mix, how do you handle making the dude happy but also not letting the guitar just ruin the mix?
Well, I think it's a matter of, when you're sitting here playing the guitar through the monitor and you hear it back through the monitors and it's just the guitar on its own, it'll sound a certain way. And, if you get someone that just wants to keep dialing in low end or keep dialing in high end or whatever they want, and it's starting to get into an area where it's not going to work, obviously I'll make them aware, like, we got to watch it, on how much, low we get, because I know that in the context of a song in a mix, it's not going to work. It's going to, it's going to make the kick and the bass go away. It's not going to be dynamic, or it's going to be too, maybe it's going to be too fizzy or whatever. I've gotten pretty good at being able to listen to guitars soloed and knowing, if kind of the frequency balance of the tone is going to work in a full mix. But what I did, and that was actually a rare instance, because Wyatt and I are such good friends that I was just like, all right, fuck it. And we kind of, just had fun with it. And then when it came time to actually mix, I essentially, did a high pass at like, 90 or something like that, or 100, and it still sounded heavy. But that's because in the context of the mix, it sounded right with some EQ moves on it. So, I think it's just a matter of managing expectations. And if someone is super adamant about doing something a certain way, but they just clearly don't know what they're talking about, I'll just politely say no, essentially.
Fair enough. That works. Okay, Matisse Clavinius is asking, how the hell do you manage to make all those different parts in such short songs as melodic and flowing in an ABR song? Like, because in 1 minute, in one 3-minute song, ABR pushes like 7 different parts, yet it doesn't sound disjointed.
JB, honestly, he is a very good composer.
They're a guitar player, JB.
Yeah. JB writes all of their music, and he demos it all out actually in Tabit, which is kind of like an even more limited version of Guitar Pro. And he actually has all of the synth pads and his violin parts and the entire orchestration of the whole song already worked out before we come in. So he's already 10 steps ahead of everything, and he knows how to arrange something that's going to work and not have parts that are fighting each other. They're going to sound right. And I think that's a big part of it.
Definitely. And when we're actually in the studio, his demos, like Grant said, are already pretty realized as far as what his vision for all the different parts are and all the different instrumentation, because he's got a really creative way of writing heavy music, which is why I'm such a big fan of the way he writes, because the songs are very interesting. They're not stock at all. They're not typical metal. He's always trying to do something different, which is great. And then, we just refine it, basically. If there are structural things that maybe sound a little wonky, which, there have been, but not many, we'll sit in a room together. Grant and I have objectivity, and we can just kind of work it out with the band. But, we did their last 3 records, and I'd say there were probably only a handful of instances where we even made, a major structure change, which is really saying something about how good he is at writing. Because, to me, obviously this is all subjective stuff, but, Grant and I sit in the room and listen to his demos, and it's like it's already a completed song. So for a band like ABR, I think the majority of that is going to be credited to just the way JB writes. But then, we'll get in the room and collaborate, and if stuff needs to be changed, or if he has an idea for a certain sound for a pad or like an instrument section, if it's not the right thing, then we'll, figure out what is the right thing, in the room.
So basically the flow is already there in the writing. Like, so you're not having to create a flow between parts in the mix that wasn't there already.
Exactly. He's got such a vision for it that, they're actually one of my favorite bands to record, not because we're, really good friends and I like the band a lot, but they're just so easy to record, because they've got such a solid, focused vision already, like, right out of the gate.
Absolutely. So Connor Haynes is asking, was it challenging doing the Affiance record with heavy instruments against super melodic vocals?
Interestingly enough, with Affiance, I work very closely with Dennis. Dennis is incredibly talented. He's just...
Is he a vocalist?
Yeah, he's got a great voice. And, I do work with Dennis on, melodic choices and things like that. But he's another one of those guys that, they've just got this unique thing happening where they're combining metalcore with these, like, really powerful kind of 80s style, power ballad, Iron Maiden type vocals, like a Bruce Dickinson approach. And, the parts that he writes work pretty well. There's the occasional time we'll have to make a choice, but a lot of the time I'll spend with him working on, arranging how we're gonna, work with, if it's a structure change on the song or harmonies and really kind of building, an entire arrangement. But I wouldn't say that he comes to the table with stuff that, is fighting in any way. It works. Is that answering the question? I'm trying to...
Well, I think that with vocals like that, if it's not written well, then it's going to be really hard to get it to stand out anyways.
Yeah, Dennis's part, their vocalist parts, like Grant said, are already pretty good. He's another example of someone who's very good at writing. Grant typically, once we have the drums down and we kind of split off into rooms, and Grant starts working with Dennis. We did their last 2 records, and both times it was one of those things where all the songs, went through a lot of changes through the whole process of recording them, from where we started, what we tracked drums to, and then Grant and Dennis will disappear upstairs into the B room where they record vocals, and once in a while Grant will just run downstairs and be like, okay, we figured out that you need to make a structure change to the music on your timeline. We did this vocal part, we figured it out, and the notes are great, but, or we need to change the chord progression under this vocal part because this vocal part is cooler or whatever. And they'll do a lot of stuff and work the parts out, and the songs just kind of grow that natural, organic way as we kind of figure it out. It's almost like figuring out a puzzle, There is a lot of good stuff to work with from the beginning, but, the songs definitely grew on the musical end and the vocal end kind of together, and they kind of dictated what the other thing does,
Makes sense. Okay, and final questions are from Pavel Chisko. What's your favorite bass processing, and what's your typical 2-bus chain?
Well, as far as bass goes, the Sansamp RBI is kind of my go-to. I'll do, a lot of stuff through that. We like to, do the thing where you separate the low and the high so you can process them differently with EQ and limiting, and just control the low end. I like to get typically what I'll do is we'll record, bass. I'll get the DI and I'll get the Sansamp signal, try to dial it, however is going to suit the song based on the player and the instrument and, the material that they're playing to. So once we have a pretty good tone dialed, that's a good starting point. We'll record it, we'll edit it, tune it usually, and then I'll typically use the Sansamp track for the kind of the high end. And sometimes if it calls for it, process it a little further, sometimes maybe with an amp sim in Pro Tools to get a little bit more bite out of it. I really like that CLA bass plugin too, because I like the distortion on it a lot. And what I also usually do with on the bass bus is use a multiband like C4 and sidechain it to the kick. So it kind of ducks out certain frequencies whenever the kick is being played. And that's, very important for especially like faster, heavy music where there's a lot of kick, because you don't want the bass getting in the way of it. So, but that's pretty much it. I mean, as far as like the chain goes, I try to keep it as simple as possible. I'm kind of OCD, so I like to have everything as retardedly simple as possible if I can, and then only start adding things in if it needs it. So I don't really go too crazy with plugins and shit. I'd say the most we usually do is, we'll record through the Sansamp, and then, or sometimes a bass amp or whatever if a band brings in some other cool shit, we'll set that up and use it. Then, like I said, we'll separate the low and the high, we'll limit it, EQ them appropriately, do, whatever the crossover is, and then I'll usually use like an amp sim or CLA bass or something like that to enhance the high end, and then some sidechain compression. That's about it.
All right, what about your 2-bus?
2-bus, same type of deal. I mean, we try to keep it very simple. I like to get the mix in a spot where it's sounding correct, and then we have I've been using the Manley Varimu. We have one of those, and that's kind of been my go-to 2-bus compressor for the last year or so, and that's a really good unit. I think it sounds great. You can make it really dramatic effect with it, or you can have it very subtle and just kind of add some glue. And that's about it. Honestly, I don't really do much else to the 2-bus because I try to get it sounding how I want it before I hit the compressor, and then I use the compressor to kind of glue it all together, and that's about it.
We've been summing before we hit the 2-bus, and that I think definitely has been a big part of our sound as well.
Oh yeah, we've got the Burl B32 summing amp.
Ooh, how do you like that? I've always wanted to try that out. I own a mothership, so I'm really into the Burl stuff.
Yeah, dude, I think it's fantastic. We got that about a year ago. Up until then, we'd been using the Shadow Hills Equinox for summing, and that was great too. It just kept breaking on us, so by the time it broke for the third time, we just kind of were like, all right, fuck this, we're going to send it back and get something else. And we got the Burl, and it's been great. I mean, very transparent, adds a lot of headroom, adds a lot of depth. Everything feels a little bit more alive, and I'm a huge fan of it. And plus it's 32 channels too, which is more than your typical Summy amp. So I'm a huge fan of the Burl, dude.
Awesome. Well, cool. Well, we're gonna have to end this now, but I just want to thank you guys for coming on and sharing so much info with our audience.
Yeah, thank you. Thanks for having us on.
Absolutely. Thanks for having us.
Yeah, and good luck with the Galactic Empire record. I hope you guys get it done soon.
Yeah, me too.
Thanks.
Well, just so you can capitalize on the
for sure.
Hopefully.
Right.
Well, there's probably another Star Wars movie coming out in like 2 years. So
Yep.
you got that window.
There's a few more. Yeah, there's definitely a few more movies coming.
Yeah, at least. So cool. All right, dudes. Thanks so much. And
All right, man.
Thanks,
Thank
guys.
you. Take care.
Thanks. Yep.
The Unstoppable Recording Machine Podcast is brought to you by Stam Audio. Stam Audio creates zero compromise recording gear that is light on the wallet. Only the best components are used, and each one goes through a rigorous testing process with one thing in mind: getting the best sound possible. Go to stamaudio.com for more info. To ask us questions, make suggestions, and interact, visit urm.academy/podcast and subscribe today.